From the moment I met Jonas, I knew he was going to do something I couldn't follow. Not in a bad way. In the way you know a river is going somewhere you can't walk. You love it anyway. You love the sound of it even when it's moving away from you. I'm making this recording for you, little one, because I don't know how this ends. And if it ends badly, I want you to know I had all of it on purpose. Every last piece of it. Your father came home from Kiever Station 11 months, 2 weeks, 4 days after we lost contact with the colony ship. He came home on a relief shuttle with 16 other survivors and 231 confirmed dead. He walked down the ramp at Fremantle Orbital in his standard issue gray coveralls, with his face thinner than I remembered and his eyes the color of shallow water, and when he saw me through the crowd, he smiled. Not with his mouth first, with the corners of his eyes. That was still him. I want you to know that. That part was still him. The first sign was the toast. We had been home for 3 days. I had been careful to let him breathe, to let him move at his own pace, through the familiar rooms of our house in the hills east of the city, to not pepper him with questions about the station, or the evacuations, or the 60-second communications blackout that UEG Command had mentioned once in a briefing, and then buried under 3 layers of official language. I told myself I was being patient. I told myself this was what you did when someone came back from something like that. On the 3rd morning I made toast. Brown bread, the way he'd always liked it, with a little butter. I set it on the table, and he sat down across from me, and before he took a bite he picked up the slice and held it very close to his face and breathed in through his nose. Twice, slowly. He didn't look strange while he did it. That was the thing that lodged in my throat. He looked like a man smelling something he was trying to remember. "Still bread?" I asked, which was a stupid thing to say. But he looked up at me, and whatever had been in his face folded back behind his eyes, and he smiled again and said, "Yeah, still bread." He ate. I watched. I did not say anything else. That afternoon he went for a run. This in itself was not unusual. Jonas had always run. When we lived in Perth before the colony lottery, he ran 6 kilometers every morning in the dark, while I slept, and came back smelling of eucalyptus and sweat. And sometimes I would wake just enough to feel him slide back into bed beside me, and I would think, this man is too awake for this world, and then I would fall back asleep. Running was his way of processing, but he was gone for 4 hours. I tracked him on my wristcom, because I am not going to pretend I wasn't worried. He moved in an enormous loop through the hills, and then south along the coast road, and then doubled back through the scrubland below the ridge. Not running by the end. Walking. The dot on my screen moved the way a person moves when they are not going anywhere in particular, or when they are looking for something and aren't sure what it looks like. He came home at dusk. He smelled of salt and dry grass. He said it had been good. I called my friend Dara that night while Jonas was showering. She asked me how he was, and I said I wasn't sure. And she said, "Give it time," and I said, "I know." And I said, "What if it's not time that's the problem?" And she said, "What else would it be?" And I didn't have an answer for that. "Maybe the Keth got to him," she said, laughing a little. The Keth were the reason the colony had been evacuated. The UEG's term for the species was Classification 7 Contact Organism, a designation so bureaucratic it made the actual aliens feel like a filing error. Everyone else called them the Keth, was the sound the early recordings captured most often from their communication signals. A soft expulsion of breath repeated. "Ha ha," I said. "He's probably fine," Dara said. "He just needs time." But I had seen what I had seen with the toast, and the way he looked at the horizon through the kitchen window sometimes. Not watching anything, listening. Before Jonas left for the colony mission, we took a long weekend up to the national park, where we had hiked on our first real date. We packed badly, too much bread, not enough water, and ended up sitting on a granite shelf above a dry creek bed at midday, rationing the last of a water bottle and laughing at ourselves. "I want 2 things," Jonas said. He had a habit of making pronouncements on mountains. He felt that altitude gave statements more gravity. "Only 2, I said. 2 big ones." He held up his fingers. 1, you tapped the first finger. 2, to get to Kiever and come back and tell you what it looked like. And then I die happy. Very dramatic at elevation. "I'm serious," he said. I took his hand. The afternoon light was coming in low across the ridge, and it made everything look like a photograph from someone else's life. The kind of life that happens to other people, and I thought, no, this one is mine, I'm keeping it. He found a flat rock near the base of a scribbly gum and dug a small hole with his belt knife and dropped his mission medallion into it, not the one on his chain, the spare, the one he'd bought himself before the selection results came through, the one he'd been carrying since he was 23 years old and first applied to the colony corps. For luck, he said. He patted the dirt down. If you need it up there, then I'll make my own, he said. That one can wait for me here. I never told him that I went back to that spot while he was gone. I went twice in the first year, once in the second, and once the night before the relief shuttle was scheduled to arrive. Just to stand near it, just because it felt like the nearest thing to him in the world. Anyway, 3 weeks after Jonas came home, a man in a gray suit came to my door. He told me his name was Colonel Ferris, and that he was with UEG Biological Sciences. He was holding a coffee cup from the shop at the end of the street, which meant he had been watching us long enough to know my schedule. I let him in. He sat at the kitchen table and explained things in the way government people explain things. Carefully, sequentially, and with all the important information removed. What he said was this: the evacuation of Kivar Station had required the surviving colonists to pass through a region of the station that had been assessed as a Keth interface zone. During this transit, some colonists may have experienced what he called incidental biological contact. He said the UEG's medical team had been monitoring all evacuees. He said Jonas's markers had come back unusual. Unusual how? I asked. We'd like to bring him in for further testing, he said. As a precaution. You're here 3 weeks after he comes home to tell me this. We wanted to be thorough before alarming anyone. I'm not alarmed, I said, which was a lie. What's unusual about his markers? Colonel Ferris looked at his coffee cup. There are Keth biological materials present in his system. Define present? Integrated, he said after a pause. I did not say anything for a long time. Outside, a bird was going at something in the gum tree by the back fence. The sound was very loud in the silence of the kitchen. He functions normally, Ferris said. He's not contagious. He's not in any danger. We just need to. You need to what? I said. Study him. Ferris put his coffee cup down. The Keth don't usually integrate with a host without purpose, he said. And for the first time, he sounded like he was telling me something true. We need to understand what the purpose is. He left me his card. I did not call the number on it. Not that day. That night I went to Jonas, while he was standing on the back porch in the dark, and I stood beside him and I said, "Tell me what happened up there." He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, "There was a light." "What kind of light?" "The kind that's not for you," he said. "The kind that's looking at something, and you happen to be in the way of it." He turned to look at me. The moon was up, and his face was the kind of serious it only got when he meant every syllable. I was in the blackout zone for 60 seconds. "That's what they told you." "Yes." "It was longer than that," he said. I took a breath. "How much longer?" "I don't know," he said. "I was somewhere else, and then I wasn't." He looked back at the sky. "I'm still me," he said. "I need you to know that. I'm what I feel like, and I still feel like me. But there's also something else in here. That doesn't have words for itself yet." I thought about the toast, about the 4-hour run, about the way he tilted his head sometimes when the wind changed direction, like he was trying to parse something in it. "Is it dangerous?" I asked. "I don't think so," he said. "I think it's curious." "About what?" He looked at me and his face did something I had no name for. Not a smile, not grief, something quieter than both. "About you," he said. "About all of this. About how we make it work when the odds are so comprehensively against us." He lifted one hand and put it flat against the side of my face, thumb along my cheekbone, and said, "Think it wanted to understand love, and it picked the wrong species to study." "The wrong species? We're too good at it," he said. "Miscalculated." I found out I was pregnant 5 days later. The test kit's readout blinked twice, and then held steady on positive, and I sat on the edge of the bathtub and looked at it for a long time. My first thought was not fear. My first thought was, so that's what the run was for. I know that sounds strange. I'll explain. I had been tracking the anomalies, quietly, the way you track something when you're not ready to name it out loud. The toast. The runs. The way Jonas had started humming tunes I didn't recognize, in no particular key, under his breath when he was doing ordinary things. Washing dishes, checking his mail, standing in the garden. The hum had a structure to it, a repeating interval that sounded almost mathematical, like someone learning to count in a new language. I had also noticed something else. Twice, when I was sleeping, I woke to find Jonas kneeling beside the bed with his hand on my back very lightly, not to wake me. Just resting there. He was checking on something. Now, I sat with the test kit in my hands and I thought, the Keth didn't integrate with Jonas to study him. They integrated with him because he was in proximity to me, and they had something they wanted to deliver. I did not panic. I am telling you this clearly because I want you to understand that it was a choice, not an absence of emotion. I felt fear the way you feel a steep drop on a mountain trail. Clearly, precisely, full understanding of the distance between you and the ground. And then I decided what to do with my feet. I called Dara. I'm pregnant, I said. There was a long pause. Is that? I don't know, I said, but I'm not calling the UEG, Asha. Not yet, I said. Not until I know more. Dara was quiet. Then she said, the support group meets on Thursday. I want to tell you about the support group because it matters. It was called the 7th Contact Survivors Circle, but nobody called it that. It met in a community hall in Fremantle on Thursday evenings in a room with folding chairs and an urn that made terrible coffee. The people there were the ones who had been close to it. Colonists, engineers, a few UEG researchers who had since left the service. People who had been near the Keth and come back with something they couldn't talk about at home. I went to the first meeting by myself, while Jonas was on one of his runs. I sat in the back and listened. A young man named Will talked about being in a research pod when the Keth made first pass. He said the air had gone very still and then the instruments had all registered the same reading at the same time. A long, flat tone at the edge of the audible spectrum. They weren't scanning us, he said. Or they were, but that wasn't the main thing. The main thing was more like, they were broadcasting, and they didn't care whether we received it. A woman named Katarine talked about her daughter, who had been 3 years old on the station, and who, since returning, had started drawing the same shape over and over on every surface she could. Not a shape anyone recognized. She calls it a friend, Katarine said. She says her friend left it there so she'd remember. I didn't speak that first evening. I went back the following Thursday. And the one after that. Jonas started coming with me on the 4th week. He sat in the circle and listened to everyone, with the quality of attention he usually reserved for the most important things. The kind of listening where his whole body is still, and his eyes are focused on something slightly behind the person speaking. The kind that means he is actually trying to hear what you mean, not just what you're saying. After the meeting, Will approached him and said, "Carrying one, aren't you?" Jonas looked at him for a moment. "What does that mean to you?" "It means you got further than I did," Will said, without judgment. "It means you're in the middle of the translation. Is that what it is? What does it feel like?" Jonas at the ceiling for a moment. "Like learning a song that doesn't start and end the way songs should," he said. "Keep expecting the resolution, and it just keeps going." Will nodded slowly. "Does it tell you things?" "Not in words," Jonas said. "In pressure. Like knowing it's about to rain." Will handed him a card. It had a single symbol on it, the shape from Katarine's daughter's drawings. "That means receiving," he said. "If you figure out the others, let me know." The UEG came for us on a Tuesday in March. I had known it was coming. Colonel Ferris had called twice more, and I had answered both times and said the right careful things. But I had also moved Jonas's medical records out of the automated system and into a private archive. And I had been in contact with a woman named Dr. Pei, who was a Keth linguistics researcher working outside the official program, and I had made sure that Dara knew everything I knew in case something happened to me. There were 3 of them. Not uniforms. Plain clothes, the way the important operations always dress down. They came in the morning while Jonas was in the garden. I watched from the kitchen window as they came through the gate in their ill-fitting jackets and spread out across the yard with the careful spacing of people who have done this before. I didn't run. I want to be clear about that. Running was never the plan. I went outside and stood at the top of the steps. Mrs. Merrick, said the one in front, not Ferris. Someone else, younger, with the flat effect of a man reading from a script he didn't write. We need to ask you and your husband to come with us. What for? I said. Precautionary bioscan, he said. Standard protocol for Category 7 contact incidents. You can do that here, I said. I have a scanner. The facility is better equipped. Behind me, Jonas had come in through the back door. I could feel him standing in the doorway. I didn't look back. Tell me about the hybrid stational program, I said. The man in front went still in a way that told me I'd landed on something real. Don't know what. Dr. Pace sent me her research, I said. The Keth don't integrate at random. The biological material Jonas is carrying has a reproductive function. You know this. You've known it since the first wave of evacuees. I kept my voice level. And the program you're running says the child belongs to the UEG. Mrs. Merrick. I'm not asking you to confirm it, I said. I'm telling you I know, and I'm telling you we're not coming. The man looked past me at Jonas. Jonas said nothing. He had his hand in his jacket pocket, and I knew without looking that his thumb was moving over the surface of the small flat disc he had started, carrying. The one Will had given him, the one Dr. Perpay said was a Keth receiver chip, salvaged from the interface zone. He'd been carrying it for weeks, learning it. The child, said the man at the gate, may not be. The child, I said, is mine. The silence after that had a particular quality. The kind of silence that comes after you have said the thing that redraws the boundary lines. Then Jonas spoke. His voice was very quiet. Tell Ferris, he said, that the Keth are already receiving. The three men looked at each other. Something moved across the face of the youngest one. Not fear, but something adjacent to it. The realization that the information flow had not been entirely in the direction they expected. They left. I do not think they intended to leave. I think something else happened. Something at the edge of my perception. A change in pressure the way Jonas had described. I think the Keth were listening and did something small and decisive in the space between one moment and the next. I think for the first time, I understood why they had chosen us. We drove north that afternoon. No particular destination, just north because that was a way. Jonas navigated from memory, which was not entirely his own memory anymore, finding routes along service roads and through small towns that weren't on the standard maps. Drove, and he sat beside me with the window down and his arm in the wind, and after a while he started to hum again. Can you hear it? I asked. What the thing you're humming? He smiled. Not exactly. I feel it, like how you know a room is big even in the dark. What does it say? He was quiet for a while. The highway curved into low scrubland and the light came from the west across the flat country in long gold sheets. It says you are very strange, he said finally. Your species, in a bad way? In a way it doesn't have a category for, he said. It's been studying social bonding behavior in species across 47 systems. It has never encountered a species that chooses, voluntarily and repeatedly, to attach itself emotionally to things it knows it will lose. I thought about this. Children, I said. Children. Spouses, parents, species that live a 10th-year lifespan, pets, places, the specific quality of light at a specific time of day. He paused. It finds this alarming. Alarming? From an optimization standpoint, he said, the emotional cost is extraordinary. The evolutionary justification is insufficient. And yet you do it anyway, compulsively, as your primary survival strategy. Is that a strategy? He looked at me. The light had changed, and his eyes were the color of green water now, deep water, and something in them was not only him but not un-him either. It says, he said, that it has colonized 112 species. It has never encountered one that fought back with love. I kept my eyes on the road. Tell it, I said, that it hasn't seen anything yet. We stopped at a town called Mura that night. A flat, quiet place at the edge of the wheat country. We sat in the car in a car park behind the only cafe and ate sandwiches from the servo, and Jonas told me, piece by piece, what the integration was. Not a takeover, not a parasite. The Keth reproduced differently across different species, but the pattern was always the same. Find the host with the strongest relational bond. Use them as a vector. Seed the child with a bridging intelligence that could exist in both registers at once. The hybrid child would be able to communicate with the Keth and with humans simultaneously. A translator, in the oldest sense. They've done this before, I asked. Many times, Jonas said. Usually the host species either destroys the hybrid or the Keth retract it. Those are the two outcomes. What's the third? He looked at the windscreen. The fluorescent light of the servo was catching the moths against the glass. This is the first time, he said, that the mother fought for it. I ate my sandwich. I thought about Katarine's daughter drawing the same shape on every surface within reach. I thought about Will, and his single card with the symbol that meant receiving. I thought about the survivors group in the folding chairs. Terrible coffee. All those people carrying something they couldn't name but hadn't let go of. We're not the first to know, I said. There are others. Yes, and the UEG wants the child because they think it's a weapon, I said. Or a tool, something they can use. Yes. And the Keth want to take it back, I said. Because, if a human mother loves the hybrid, the integration becomes permanent, and they lose control of the bridge. Jonas was quiet. What do you want? I asked. He turned to look at me. In the flat yellow light of the car park, he looked exhausted and ancient and entirely himself. The thin face, the specific angle of the jaw, his eyes did, when he was about to say something important that he had been thinking about for a long time. I want to go back to that mountain, he said, and dig up the medallion. I need to tell you about the morning we broadcast. We had been 3 weeks in the north by then, moving through station towns and coastal settlements, staying with people from the survivors' circle who let us sleep in spare rooms without asking too many questions. Dara had helped us build a relay network. Nothing sophisticated, just personal comms and shared file encryption, the kind of thing that doesn't look like anything from the outside. Dr. Pei came up from Perth with 2 of her colleagues and a set of portable signal equipment that she said could bounce a broadcast off the orbital infrastructure if the geometry was right. I was 6 months pregnant by then. The child moved at night and hummed, just barely. At a frequency you couldn't quite hear with your ears. You felt it in your sternum. Tss. Jonas said the Kifilov laughter was something similar, a deep harmonic resonance that meant something like of course. We set up the equipment on a ridge above a salt lake just before dawn. The lake was still and pink, and the stars were still up over the east. Jonas and Will calibrated the relay while Dr. Pei ran the signal parameters. Katarine's daughter sat on a flat rock and drew in the dirt with a stick, drawing the shapes only she knew the names for. I sat beside her for a while. What does that one mean? I asked, pointing. She looked at it for a while. The way children look at things they're trying to translate into language that will work for grown-ups. Home? She said. But the kind that comes with you. I made the broadcast myself. Dr. Pei had offered to run it, but I said no. I sat in front of the transmitter and I spoke for 11 minutes and I did not prepare anything in advance. I told anyone listening, UEG Keth, the monitoring satellites in low orbit, whoever, that I was Asha Merrick, wife of Kivar Station colonist Jonas Merrick, and that I was carrying a hybrid child, and that the child was mine, and I intended to keep her, and anyone who had a different plan was going to have to come through me to execute it. I told the UEG that the child was not a weapon. Using her as one would be the final proof that they had learned nothing from the contact, that the Keth had picked human hosts for a reason, and the reason was the specific human capacity to love what you don't fully understand. And if the UEG wanted to demonstrate that this capacity had limits, they were welcome to try. They should know that limits were not something I had located yet. I told the Keth, and Jonas told me afterward that they heard this, that he felt the reception of it like a change in wind, that I knew what the integration was, that I understood the bridge function, that I was not afraid of what my daughter was going to be, that if they wanted to understand love from the outside, they could study their data for the next 10,000 years and still not understand it. But if they wanted to understand it from the inside, they were welcome to stay. I had discovered that love was one of those things that made room for itself. I told Jonas, because he was standing 20 feet away and listening, and I wanted him to hear it in the open air rather than in a car at night, that he had been right on the mountain. 2 things. Those were the right number of things to want. Simple and sufficient. And I had them both, and I was not giving either one up, and that was the complete extent of my position. The broadcast went out on every channel Dr. Pei could reach. About 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then Jonas made a sound. A low sound, not quite a word, not quite the hum, something between the two. Put his hands over his eyes. What? I said. They're laughing, he said. All of them, both of them. He lowered his hands. He was crying, which I had not seen him do since before the mission. The Keth are laughing, he said, and they don't have a translation for it, and they're trying to find one, and the closest thing they have is. What? He said. Of course, he said. They keep saying of course. The sun came over the ridge then and hit the salt lake, and the whole flat world turned, white and gold. And Katarine's daughter looked up from her drawing and said something in a language no one else spoke, and smiled. The UEG sent a delegation the following week. Not Colonel Ferris, someone more senior, a woman named Director Avery who sat across from me at a table in a town hall in Northam and told me that the situation had become, politically speaking, unprecedented. We've had 40 hours of signal response, 6 separate Keth communication nodes, she said. Broadcast appears to have constituted an unofficial first contact negotiation. I wasn't negotiating, I said. I was stating. She looked at me. She had the look of someone who had spent 20 years in government and had just encountered something the training materials had not covered. The Keth have transmitted formal acceptance of continued integration with consenting hosts, she said. They're calling it. Our linguists are still working on the precise translation, something like a covenant. That sounds right, I said. And in exchange, she said, carefully, they're offering information, navigation data, medical protocols. What our xenobiologists are calling she consulted her notes, a comprehensive biological archive of 47 contact species, including 3 that achieved interstellar travel and 2 that achieved something we don't have a category for yet. I thought about the shape Katarine's daughter had drawn in the dirt. Home. The kind that comes with you. What do you need from me? I asked. Avery looked at her hands. Honestly, she said, we need you to help us explain this to people. What it is, what it isn't. It isn't, is a threat, I said. Yes, and what it is, I said, is a choice. She was quiet for a moment. Not everyone will choose it, she said. No, I agreed, but that's what makes it a choice. Jonas and I went back to the mountain in April. The day was clear and cool, the kind of autumn day that makes the granite look freshly cut. We walked the same trail we had walked 8 years before, carrying better water this time, and at midday we sat on the same shelf above the dry creek bed, in the same angle of light. He found the spot under the scribbly gum, without needing to search for it. The earth there was undisturbed. He dug with his belt knife, just a few centimeters down, and his fingers found metal. He held the medallion up. It was green at the edges from the soil and the years. He turned it over in his hand for a long time. I watched his face, and could not always tell what was him and what was the Kith, and had reached the point of understanding that the distinction was not as important as I had once thought. Still there, he said. Still there, I agreed. He put it around his neck. We stayed on the rock until the sun started to move, and the shadows of the gum trees lengthened across the granite, and, somewhere in the valley below, a bird called out in the early evening silence. Jonas was humming again, very quietly, the way he always hummed now. That slow, repeating interval, the song that doesn't start and end the way songs should. I leaned against him and put my hand on my stomach and felt the answer from inside. The same interval, a half beat behind. The way an echo comes back lower and quieter than the original, but unmistakably the same sound. I thought about the Keth trying to find a translation for what it felt like and coming back again and again to the same 2 words. Of course you love it. Of course you hold it. Of course you go back to the mountain and dig up the thing you buried, and it's still there. And that doesn't surprise you at all, because that was always what it was for. We sat there until the stars came out. The child moved. Jonas hummed. 47 species worth of archived data sat somewhere in the signal spectrum around us, like a library we didn't know we'd been given. I thought, we are so strange and we are so good at this, and this is ours, I thought. Of course.